St. Petersburg is a classic tableau building game from designer Michael Tummelhofer and Rio Grande Games.
In St. Petersburg, players build the city of St. Petersburg and get some victory points along the way. It accommodates 2 to 4 players and lasts about an hour. There is one expansion called New Society and Banquets, which adds a 5th player and some new cards.
Each player starts St. Petersburg with 25 rubles and 2 tokens in their color. One of these tokens goes at the start of the scoring track, and the other goes in front of its owner. The 4 starting player markers are dealt out randomly according to the number of players, and then the deck of cards is separated by type, and each smaller deck is placed in its space on the board. Next, the game begins.
One player is the administrator, and they're responsible for dealing cards and managing money over the course of the game. At the beginning of the game, the administrator will place a number of worker cards determined by the number of players into the upper row of the game board.
Each round consists of 4 phases: the worker phase, building phase, aristocrat phase, and upgrade phase. In each phase, the players will take their actions and then score the cards that are associated with that phase. Then the cards for the next phase are laid out.
On their turn, a player can take one of 4 actions: buying a card, adding a card to their hand, playing a card, or passing. The first player for a phase is the player that holds the first player marker for that phase, and play continues until all players have passed.
To buy a card, a player pays the cost that's listed in its upper left and then adds the card face up to the play area in front of them. You can buy a card from either row of the board, and buying one from the lower row costs you 1 less ruble. Every copy of a card that you have in your play area already reduces the cost of buying the same card by 1 ruble, and there's also upgrade cards and special abilities that will further reduce the cost. All of these cost reductions are cumulative, but you always have to pay a minimum of 1 ruble for a card.
You can add a card from either row to your hand without paying its cost. You have a hand limit of 3 cards, and you can't discard a card from your hand. In order to play a card as an action, you pay the cost that's listed on the card, and you put it in the play area in front of you.
Upgrade cards replace other cards that are already in the play area. The upgrade must match the color of the card that it's replacing, and its cost is equal to the difference between its cost and the cost of the original card. If the upgrade costs the same amount or less, then you pay 1 ruble. Now, workers have to be replaced by an upgrade of the same type, which is marked with a special symbol in their upper right. Upgrades are going to increase the number of rubles or victory points that you earn, or give you other special abilities.
After everyone has taken their actions in the worker phase, each player collects rubles for the worker cards that are in their play area. Now, you keep your money secret from everyone else at the table. During the building and aristocrat phases, you collect rubles and victory points according to the building and aristocrat cards in your play area. During the upgrade phase, no scoring happens.
At the end of a phase, the administrator discards any cards that are left in the lower row of the board and moves any cards left in the upper row down and to the right. They're then going to grab the deck for the next phase and start dealing cards from it into the upper row, starting from the left, until there's a total of 8 cards on the board.
The game ends in the round when one of the decks is depleted. We continue the phases for the rest of that round, and then we score. Each player gets 1 victory point for every 10 rubles that they have, and they lose 5 points for every card that's left in their hand. You also earn victory points for any aristocrats that you have in your play area, and the chart, which tells you what they're worth, is on the board. The player with the most points at the end is the winner.
So probably my favorite thing about St. Petersburg is the way in which it encourages adaptability and tactical play, as well as long-term strategy. Because it's card-based and the cards are coming up only a few at a time in a random order, you really do have to adjust a little bit on the fly. You can't just plan your strategy from completely known variables all the way through to the end and then set it up and watch it go. There's a fair amount of adjusting that has to happen, and the fact that you collect the majority of your points during the game rather than at the end really contributes to this. There's also a large number of paths to victory, which is always nice. There isn't one strategy that always predominates, and I find that the combination of that with the variety of the cards means there's a fair amount of replay value here. Now, the thing about most card-based games, and it's certainly true here, is that they do initially favor experienced players who know the deck. So much of this game is about finding good synergies between cards and knowing what's worth upgrading, what's worth buying at all, that a new player is really hampered by the fact that they don't really know what's in the deck, and they're going to spend most of their first game just trying to get their head around which cards are even worth picking up in the first place. So it is something that can be a little bit discouraging for new players. Don't let it put you off. The game really does reward more experience, and the kind that you'll get after even just 1 or 2 playthroughs.
So another potential weakness for St. Petersburg happens with a lot of Euro games, and that's a limited amount of interaction. So you can sometimes feel like you're playing by yourself, even though you're playing in a game with a bunch of people in it. And it's a shame that this one here also suffers from that. Also, though the mechanics are pretty cool and kind of interesting, the theme is a little bit pasted on, so it can kind of feel like this game, though it's called St. Petersburg, isn't really integrated with that St. Petersburg theme, which is too bad, because that's really unique. It's not something you're going to see around in a lot of different games. However, that theme is really well realized in the art and the components. This is a beautiful game. The cards are really cool to look at. The detail and the intricacy that went into the board and the money and the cards and the components, it all feels like a lot of time and effort was put in there. So you're going to enjoy taking a look at this game, and the pieces are really nice to play with. Also, this game has a real strength in that it is quick to play and there's very little downtime in it. So even though sort of you can pick up the rule book and it feels like a Euro game and that you've got a lot to read and a lot to learn, actually, once you learn this game, you're gonna zip through it quite quickly. It's only an hour to play. So that means that you're gonna be able to get a few games in, really get into the mechanics, really learn those decks and those cards like Kaja was talking about, and that's not gonna take you too long. So real strength here.